Although corporal punishment was once common throughout Britain, there was never a single set of rules followed by every school. Customs varied enormously from one county to another, from one head teacher to the next, and even from one classroom to another. Two children living only a few miles apart could leave school with completely different memories of discipline. Some schools relied almost entirely on the ruler. Others preferred the slipper. In many secondary schools, the cane became the ultimate punishment, reserved for offences considered serious enough to warrant a visit to the headmaster or headmistress. For many pupils, moving from infant school to junior school marked the beginning of an entirely new disciplinary world. One former pupil remembered that his infant teachers generally relied upon little more than a slap across the legs or a sharp word. By the time he entered junior school, however, discipline had become much more formal. The boys and girls were separated into different parts of a large Victorian building, with very little contact between them during the school day. Among the boys, the cane quickly became part of school life. Stories circulated constantly about who had received it and why. The girls, meanwhile, were said to have a headmistress who kept a cane locked away in her office. Whether anyone had actually seen it used remained something of a mystery. Like so many school rumours, the story grew with each telling. The ruler, however, was used openly. Almost every pupil remembered receiving at least the occasional rap across the knuckles. Usually it followed untidy work, inattention during lessons, or careless mistakes. Most accepted it as an ordinary part of school life. One former pupil remembered his music teacher particularly well. She regularly used the ruler on inattentive children, although he admitted that the punishment rarely caused much lasting pain. Occasionally, the edge of the ruler would catch a finger awkwardly, producing a sharper sting, but compared with other punishments, it seemed relatively mild. His class teacher, however, preferred rather different methods. She often instructed children to roll down their knee-length socks before bringing a wooden ruler firmly across the backs of their legs. On other occasions, she would summon a child to the front of the room, ask them to roll up a shirt sleeve, and then deliver several hard slaps to the exposed arm. What made these punishments memorable was not simply the discomfort they caused. It was the audience. Every blow was delivered while classmates looked on. Children waiting their turn could often judge the teacher's mood by watching those who stood ahead of them. If the first few pupils received particularly forceful punishments, those still waiting knew they were unlikely to escape lightly. For many, the waiting proved almost as unpleasant as the punishment itself. Several former pupils reflected that primary school discipline often appeared inconsistent. Unlike secondary schools, where different teachers taught different subjects, primary schools usually placed children with one class teacher for the entire year. As a result, discipline frequently reflected that teachers' own personality rather than a consistent school policy. Some teachers rarely punished anyone. Others seemed to reach for the ruler several times each week. Children soon learned what each teacher would tolerate and what would almost certainly lead to punishment. Secondary school brought greater consistency. Most pupils quickly understood which offences would earn detention, which might result in a slippering, and which almost certainly meant a visit to the headmaster's office for the cane. The punishments themselves became part of the school's unwritten rules. One former pupil attended a boys' boarding school, where the cane was virtually the only form of corporal punishment. The slipper was never used. Canings were normally administered in the dormitory, making the experience strangely private despite taking place within the boarding house itself. For those boys, the cane became almost routine, forming part of the school's accepted system of maintaining discipline. Others attended schools where the slipper remained the preferred punishment well into the 1970s. Some even found it more painful than certain canings they later experienced. The severity depended entirely upon the determination of the teacher delivering it. A vigorous slippering from a determined games mistress or senior teacher could leave a far stronger impression than a comparatively mild caning, intended merely as a formal warning. Looking back, many former pupils concluded that there had never been a simple answer to the question of which punishment hurt the most. The cane certainly possessed the greater reputation. The The slipper often carried greater unpredictability. The ruler, although usually viewed as the least severe, could still become remarkably painful in the hands of an angry teacher. Yet none of these implements existed in isolation. They formed part of a wider educational culture that believed discipline, obedience, and respect for authority were essential ingredients of learning. Whether that belief was right or wrong remains the subject of continuing debate. What cannot be disputed is that millions of British schoolchildren grew up in classrooms where the possibility of corporal punishment was simply accepted as another part of everyday school life. For some, those memories have softened with time. For others, they remain as vivid as though the school bell had rung only yesterday.